Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ape Nation, your number one source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and today we have a very special guest and making his return to the Ape Nation channel for the second time, the director of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Mr. Wes Ball. Wes, how are you doing, man?
Very good. Glad to be back.
Happy to
Let's
have you
let's
back.
get into to the juicy details.
First, before I get started, I want to say I already told you a while ago, but I love the movie. I think you did a really great job. Everyone involved did a great job. I think you
Thanks.
made something that was, I think, really honoring the legacy of what those first three movies and just the original franchise did as a whole. So I think you did a really fantastic job.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was certainly it was a tightrope walk, to do this. It's kind of a soft reboot. All the characters that you loved before are gone, and how do we kind of, chart a new path forward for the franchise, for the studio, and you know, we did our best. So we'll see what happens next.
Now that you've gotten some time to sit with the movie, audience have gotten to see it, everyone's gotten a chance to watch it. You've had the last few months to just kind of settle with it. How are you feeling? Are you happy with the overall reception of everything?
Oh yeah, it's all good. I mean, everyone's happy. The studio's happy. It's done really well. And all the kind of after theater kind of areas of things. It's great. So I'm really happy to let people enjoyed it for the most part, and we'll try to take all that energy forward. Into whatever comes next.
Gotcha. Is there anything that you weren't able to talk about for all the time you were making it that you're finally able to, that you're really glad that you can talk about now? Like, is there any specific part of the movie that you've had to keep a secret all this time?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, it's just story stuff, probably. It's like you don't want to give away certain things, and even though, you know, in the trailers things got given away that I wouldn't have really wanted to. That's just a thing that happens. But I don't know. It is what it is. I couldn't even tell you anymore now what I'm precious about and what I'm not precious about. It's been, I don't know how long it's been. May 24th, or May. When did we come out? May 19th. What was that? It
Yeah,
was.
it's May
Yeah,
10th, I think. Yeah,
it was 24th originally, but
that's right.
uh but yeah, so I don't know. We can talk about whatever's on your mind. You probably know it. I have my
I
distance on it. And
Yeah,
I'm the kind of guy that's a little bit. I'm always kind of glass half empty on my things. I look at things and say, oh, what can I do better next time? I don't look at it and say, oh, isn't that great? I tend to. If I ever felt like I did a movie and I said, oh, well, that's perfect. I probably won't make another movie. You know what I mean? It's like it's the opportunities you missed, or the swings you took that didn't quite work, that kind of push you to move on to the next thing and try to do better on the next one. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of how I am, just personality wise.
I gotcha. Well, speaking of that, one of my questions, is there anything in particular that you look back on and you're like, you wish you could have changed that or added something or taken something out, or did it come out more or less how you envisioned it?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to say, honestly. It's a 5 year journey. You know what I mean? So I couldn't tell you, even I remember what I had in my mind 5 years ago when we started out this thing. Um, but I would say probably, yeah, it's certainly the kind of movie that we all set out to make, tonally and visually and all those things. And that kind of initial idea of, we have to kind of figure out a way to reboot this without abandoning kind of all of the goodwill that came before us. You know what I mean? Introduce new characters, start a new journey, start a new adventure, all that kind of stuff is certainly kind of comes through. Looking back, I guess I would look at things that, like, we knew going in that the script is a difficult thing. It's a little bit of an odd structure. You know what I mean? And so there's things like that where it's like, I don't know how you would do it any differently, and still kind of hold on to things that people like. Like, for instance, obviously I hear all the kind of criticisms, of course, but along with all the praise. But I've never been on a movie that's been quite so. It's weird. It's like some people are vehemently opposed to how slow the movie is in the beginning. And then some people are vehemently opposed to how slow the movie is to the end. And it's like, it's this really strange, like, people just see it very differently. Whereas typically in the movies in the past, like, oh, you kind of like it or you don't, or you're kind of in the spectrum of things. But this is wildly different takes on all sides, which I think is fascinating. which is cool. And people have their favorites, like people, and the one sentence they'll say, oh, the beginning moves too slow or the middle's too slow. But then, Rock is their favorite character, which is really, for the most part, he is the
The
middle of the
entire first
movie.
half of the movie. Yeah.
Exactly right. So it's just interesting, how people kind of, and I think that comes with the territory of Apes movies that have, expectations along with them, and sort of, a long legacy of movies and TV shows and other media behind it before. So, you go into it with a certain expectation. And what I really kind of enjoy always is like the people that go and watch it twice, or three times or whatever it is, and they go back, they have the kind of their initial reaction from what they were expecting sitting down in the theater after seeing the trailers or whatever they're hoping for, and then come out with a certain point of view, and then watch it again when it came out on home video, and suddenly their perspectives change, because they're not sort of expecting the thing that they were imagining it could be. They kind of know going in, so they kind of look at it differently, and they pick up on things that were very subtle for the first time for them or whatever, and it changes their kind of viewpoint. That's been really enjoyable, because we tried to put a lot of kind of thought, into every little scene. And that's kind of the nature of these movies, is that, every shot is considered for months, you know what I mean? Because of the visual effects aspect of it all. Do we need this shot? Do you want to spend another, whatever it is, $100,000 on this shot of our budget that we have? You know what I mean? It's a very interesting kind of, process, or the technical aspects of it all, along with the artistic aspects of it all, are just heightened to a degree that just aren't in typical movies. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been fascinating experience. I've learned a crap ton, and it's been a really enjoyable,
Speaking of that kind of pacing, because the movie it's definitely, especially I think the first half, it moves a lot slower. It's more just about being in the world, spending time with those characters,
Sure.
getting to know everyone. That's one of the things I love about it.
I like slower stuff. I like to sit in shots. For instance, we have 1,500 shots in the movie. That's crazy. It's something like, one of our editors, worked on the last, Dirk, he worked on the last Indiana Jones movie, and he was saying they had 3,000 shots. So that means like our shots are at least twice as long. You know what I mean? So it's like I enjoy that personally. Now, I also totally am aware, it might be something I take forward into future movies, that our culture, our media consumption, in our world, things like TikTok and YouTube, and this is even going on in my days growing up, the MTV crowd, they want anything faster. Well, TikTok, is even way further.
Yeah.
It's like our appetites for pace has only shrunk. You know what I mean? So, and that doesn't necessarily mean, you can't be slow and thoughtful in places, but it's certainly kind of a rhythm thing where, you want to keep that in mind as you work on these things. And, that's probably one thing when I look back on it, it's like, because you're working in these shots for so long, and they're kind of nascent stage of just actors with dots, or there's no visual effects, or it's all just storyboards, and you're trying to make these choices of like, what's the pace of the shot? Okay, I'm gonna imagine what it looks like when he's got his fur. I'm gonna imagine what it looks like when he's not standing in an empty stage, but he's actually standing with hundreds of apes around him. And you make these choices, based on what you hope it's going to become, or what you think it's going to become, and then you send it off into the ether for Weta to work on. And when it comes back, you kind of don't have a lot of opportunities to go and change it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a miracle that by the end of the process, when you make these choices months and months and months in advance, and they come in and you have to kind of live by them, it's amazing it all even works as well as it
Yeah,
does. That was a huge learning experience on that.
that was something that, and I'll talk about this little more in a little bit. But when I was watching the raw cut,
Mm-hmm.
that it didn't really hit me until I was watching that here, and I was listening to your commentary, thinking about, oh yeah, they're making this movie, but they're not going to know what the shot actually looks like until
Yeah,
a year
you're,
from
you're
now,
you're taking a
and that's
huge leap
insane.
of faith on every step, especially in our case where we don't have any humans basically in the movie, aside from Freya and the Trevathan character for a short bit. It's like it's very much a ape-centered movie. You know what I mean? So that was fascinating to kind of be a part of that whole process. Like I said, there aren't movies like this. They're very, they're just kind of their own thing, and it was a hell of a learning experience to kind of get thrown into the deep end here, and had a great time. Obviously, we had really talented people that, starting with my producers, writers, Rick and Amanda, all the way to, Eric, our VFX supervisor, who had all been involved in these movies for so long. So it was easy to kind of had people to lean on, for this kind of stuff. But no, it was really a blast. It was fun. I feel like just at the end of the movie, I figured out how to make these movies. You know what I mean? And they're gonna put it out into the world. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a fascinating thing. I regret some of the cut scenes and stuff. There's a couple times where it's like, oh, I love this shot so much, and I think it tells something about the story. But you show it to some friends and people, and you can feel where it's like, okay, they don't need it. You know what I mean? And that's usually where where things got cut. If they don't need it, we cut it out so we can get the time down. But yeah, it is what it is. Live and learn and move on to the next thing.
And with making a movie that is kind of moves a bit slower and is a little more grand like this, coming off of the Maze Runner trilogy, where those movies are a lot more high intensity, action packed, more fast
Sure.
pace. Was there any sort of prep you did or anything you watched or took in to kind of mentally prepare for making something a bit different in terms of structure and
No,
style, or did it just kind of
not
come
really.
naturally?
He just comes in there. That's what the story wanted. You know what I mean? It's an adventure story about Noah, this new ape that we've never met before, and a new culture. He comes from this eagle clan that we've never seen before. And setting up the kind of stakes of the world of today. It's like there are no humans left and all that kind of stuff. It's like it needed to kind of take its time for it to kind of grow and do its thing. And our kind of opening is 10 minutes, essentially. That probably throws off the rhythm a tiny bit, but for the most part, it all kind of lines up. That midpoint is when everything turns on the bridge, and they're captured essentially, and then we enter into a new world. Literally, the page, the movie turns into the Proximus stage of the movie. Um, that first kind of act is very much kind of setting up that kind of that pastoral kind of world of these apes, this kind of peaceful tribe. And then everything kind of falls apart when the other apes kind of invade. And then that's all pretty typical first act, third act, second act kind of stuff, rhythms and stuff. But that's okay. It is what it is. Like I said, it's like the script. It wanted what it wanted. And it's we kind of said early on that it's not really an action movie, which by the way would be really fun to do. An actual apes action movie would be freaking sweet. But this is very much not that. It's a thoughtful kind of adventure and coming of age story for a young ape named Noah. You know what I mean? So it just kind of dictated, the script dictated what needed to happen. So
And speaking of that opening, there is a quick other opening before those 10 minutes of Noah where we see Caesar for one final time, which
yeah, sure.
completely took me by surprise. Um, when in the process did you come up with that idea? Was that from the start you knew you wanted to do that?
Yeah, that was the very beginning. We needed to do that because when we're talking to people who were fans of the movies, you'd be so shocked how many just average audience members forgot Caesar died.
With the amount of
You
comments I've
know,
seen saying so, I'm not as
yeah,
surprised.
and the truth is with these movies, it's not enough to get just the diehard fans. You have to get, which I think we did. We have to get people that are just casually interested in these movies, right? Um, and so that was a key scene for me, just to kind of nothing else to remind people. Oh yeah, there was this character that I loved, and I never really got to see his end. I saw him close his eyes, and then we tilt up to the sky, and we imagine the world beyond that. It felt like this the right send off to kind of, hey, we're coming from this crazy world, this amazing world with these characters that we love, and then how that transfers us into this world where he's become myth and legend. You know what I mean? And that idea of, in fact, we had another scene where Raka talks about these ideas, where that scene is really about um, about Caesar, who that night became a legend. You know what I mean? His ashes, his body, his spirit was sent to the sky, to the stars. You know what I mean? And Rocket talks about that in a deleted scene. How this almost spirituality was born. Hundreds of years later. Stemming from this event. In fact, that one young ape, Cornelius, whoever you want it to be, I don't really say. It's all about the reflection in his eyes and how that I love that idea of like this young ape witnessing this kind of event, a send off that's probably never happened for an ape before. You know what I mean? He's going to remember this day for the rest of his life. And this
Yeah.
story is going to echo throughout the ages. You know what I mean? And I love that kind of concept to start the movie that way, in this very kind of mythic way, and then how that would, take us, to this completely different world of, waterfalls and water and wild lands that turns out to be, the remains of our civilization. It just felt like a perfect kind of time cut. You know what I mean? In fact, the one thing that actually was very late added in the game was a little text beginning, right? So the very opening kind of prologue stuff with the text, because there were just too many audience members that did not know context for how we fit into the previous movies, right? They like those movies, but they don't remember them, So we needed to we don't hand holding people's hand. We don't sit down and talk about this great past and myth, and you kind of sit thinking away. So that little opening prologue thing, which was, I think War did it too. I think a couple movies have done it. It just served as a great kind of intro for the average audience member who didn't really know a lot, and just, we wrestled over what those lines were for the longest time. But yeah, just all kind of an effort just to kind of, take this giant swing that we did, which was, cut 300 years later and forget all the characters that you thought that you loved. You know what I mean? It was a pretty bold experiment to kind of, take that giant leap. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a big risk too, because you're reminding everyone of this incredible character and then jumping forward into, okay, here's
yeah.
my turn, you know.
Yeah, but it's also kind of crucial in a way, because very much Caesar is this kind of spiritual element hanging over the entire movie, right? There's obviously hints, visual hints all over the place, about, Noah and how he, literally or figuratively kind of, kind of fits into that spirit of Caesar. You know what I mean? And so it was kind of crucial to kind of establish some kind of visual, some memory of what he was, as we kind of move forward into thinking of him as this kind of mythic figure.
So something you just mentioned is, getting a look at how our society and our whole world kind of evolves into this post-apocalyptic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you did that by kind of a lot of the structures. In fact, I think the first shot we get of Noah is that long shot where he eventually goes
Mm-hmm.
up. You see the building covered in grass, and then it closes up to Noah, Soona, and Anaya. And there's so much of that throughout the entire movie of you look closely, oh, that's this building that's
Mm-hmm.
actually hidden under this. Oh, this is
Sure.
a stadium. There's all these different things, and the biggest one is using Los Angeles Airport
Mm,
as
yeah, sure.
the vaults at the end of the movie. And I was curious, like, was that fun for you, just getting to take pieces of our world and finding ways to just incorporate that into
Yeah.
everything throughout the world?
Yeah. As a kid growing up on that first Planet of the Apes, right? The 68 version, that was one thing that kind of just totally captured my imagination. The idea that our world could erode away to the points where you really can't tell anymore. When you go into that old subway, in the caves, and it just feels like some old ancient, remains that will be lost to time. That was just a cool concept. The fact that we got to go kind of in the middle, where it's like you're still seeing evidence of our world, but you're seeing how in another 1,000 years it might be gone. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? In fact, there's great photos of, those ruins in Mexico or in South America, where when they first found those old pyramids, where they just look like mountains. They're covered with vegetation. They're a little bit like too perfect. And then when you sweep it all away, you see like they were black and white photos taken long, long ago. And it was just fascinating to see how quickly these kind of landscapes that we're so familiar with, the landscapes we created, kind of get reclaimed and become almost unrecognizable. I just thought it was fascinating, that kind of ideas, even down to like the little stadium idea that, he wakes up in that first night, when we kind of see, in the background, you don't even see it, but you see what's left of bleachers. We actually had to put those into the environment, what's these little blue shapes. They're very blurry. That, I thought that was kind of the cool idea, is that we weren't going to like say, look, everybody, here's ruins. We wanted to kind of have it's just in the background. It's occasionally you'll notice, and maybe one shot that kind of takes you to, oh, we're in the remains of an old stadium or whatever it is, or an old parking lot that's now covered over by like water and mud or whatever it is. That was kind of fun to do that, just to kind of like, subconsciously you take that stuff in, but never kind of like sit there and like dwell on it. show it off necessarily, other than that opening shot, that opening shot
Yeah.
with like, following the evil eagle and revealing these worlds. That was like the first shot that I had in my mind when I sort of conceiving of this thing. And so, um, it was like the first shot I prevised, just to kind of like feel it out. What's this? What's a cool reveal where not only do you kind of go from this natural environment with this bird, up to these mountains. Oh, they're not mountains, they're buildings. Oh my God, that looks amazing. And then, oh wait, there's something on those buildings. Holy crap, it's apes climbing these buildings. I just thought that was awesome. Like that would totally be me as an ape, and growing up in this world, like setting out like adventures, climbing mountains or climbing trees, whatever. They're climbing the remains of old towers, and naturally, of course, they'd be perfect places for eagles to nest. You know what I mean? They're kind of safe. The predators can't get to them. They're perfect little like perches and all. It's a perfect little place for like this ritual to kind of take place. You know what I mean? Which it's
Yeah.
cool stuff.
So speaking about eagles, the Eagle clan, their entire culture, how they do things with the ceremony of, raising the birds and all that stuff. How did that come about? Was that an idea you had early on, or did you kind of have to
Yeah.
find that as you went along developing the characters?
No, that was kind of one of the first things that kind of popped in my mind. And again, I don't know how it's all connected. I got to credit Josh and Rick and Amanda with a lot of how we work together, kind of figure out how these kind of instinct level ideas would pop into my head early on, But I thought one of my earliest ideas was meeting these group of characters climbing up these what are left of old ancient ruins. You know what I mean? And they're going on. I thought it needed to be this kind of ritualistic, coming of age, rite of passage thing. You know what I mean? So I felt like the idea probably came from at some point I was like, well, there's this kind of almost cliche kind of thing of, man's best friend, dogs, how we domesticated dogs and they became like our these loyal companions to us. I was like, that would be cool to show as we kind of, are basically telling the story of how apes are going through their own kind of march, through civilizations like we did, as humans did. They're entering their era now. That'd be cool if they had some kind of like, maybe that's a dog or something. I was like, dog's it's too, obvious. Or it's kind of uninteresting. That's kind of man's best friend. It's like, oh, I even had some concept arts done where I had they did hyenas. You know what I mean? I had hyenas on leashes just to see there's something else, and it didn't work. And then suddenly it dawned on me, oh, eagles, the Mongolian culture, how they kind of raise these things. And you look at eagles, not hawks, not falconry necessarily, but like, eagles, they have like 7 foot wingspans. These things are like, murderers, in the sky, like they're incredible kind of creatures. And so I just thought, oh, that'd be kind of neat if we kind of, raised eagles for something in their culture. They learned how to do this thing very much like humanity did back, thousands of years ago. And it was just a cool idea. And then we figured out how to kind of weave it all through the story itself and how, this one eagle character kind of became representative spiritually of his father, and how that kind of acceptance was kind of earned, and how Noah would sort of step into the footsteps of his father. You know what I mean, through this relationship with this eagle.
Yeah, I think that storyline with Noah and the eagle, it works really well. Especially that scene where it finally respects him and they come together and it leads into the third act. I think it the more I watched it, that whole thing kind of I think moved me a little bit more. So the
Sure.
eagle
Yeah.
stuff I think is something I'm assuming we get more movies, is something I'm very looking forward to seeing how you uh bring all that more into the fold.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's a fun component.
Something I also really loved about this movie was the characters of Noah, Soona, and Anaya. Their relationship, that trio, I think, is great. I think there's right from the opening scene, you got me to care about and love all three of them, right
Sure.
from the jump. And I think a lot of that is in part due to the chemistry between the three actors. And was
Definitely.
that
Yeah.
something that you spent a lot of attention on when you were casting and getting the movie prepped?
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of what you do in casting, and I can't say I sit there and focus on it. You hope for it, and you make choices based on instinct and gut feelings on these things. When I was making the Maze Runner movie, it was a very similar thing. It's like we're making this kind of teen series that needs to kind of really work on that level, and so you cast people that you think are going to mesh well together, that they're going to have good personalities. And so we got really lucky on that one too, where you put them together early on. In our case with apes, for like weeks, for 6, 7 weeks, they got to be together and learn each other and become great friends. You know what I mean? And I just am a big believer that kind of chemistry, it does find its way into the movie, whether it's written into it or not. You know what I mean? Like Anaya is a good example of a character where, we thought it was kind of funny and it's cool and all that kind of stuff, but Travis really kind of, lifted that character into a place that, was even more than we hoped. You know what I mean? Um, but but yeah, it was fun. And we had to cut a lot of stuff that strengthened their relationships together. That was sad, but again necessary. But it's that you're trying to lay the groundwork for characters and a world, and you know that you're going to be able to explore in future installments. You know what I mean? These are characters that are going to be important somehow, and you want them to make at least some impression that you get to explore later on in really dramatic and interesting ways. You know what I mean?
So another thing that I really loved, and I think this is something that everyone's probably told you that they loved, is the visual effects. I mean, the things
Sure.
that
Yeah.
Weta is able to do is just unbelievable every single
Yeah.
time they put out a movie.
Yeah. It's incredible.
And yeah, I mean, there was a specific shot in this movie that blew my mind just because I couldn't believe it wasn't real. And it
Mm-hmm.
was on the bridge scene where they're getting attacked by Proximus's apes. There's a shot of Raka falling in the water,
Yeah.
and you just see it, and I'm just stunned. I'm like the wet hair, the fur, like it's so unfathomably
Oh yeah.
real.
It's incredible. I mean, and that water work. I mean, it's the best that's ever been done.
Yeah,
They were
it's
pushing the
incredible.
boundary on these things. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
speaking of pushing the boundaries, like for you to be able to be the director making this movie and being a part of that, because I think every time, what I mean, really just these Planet of the Apes movies, every single one of them is groundbreaking and pushing the boundaries of what technology can do forward.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
for you to be a part of that process, what is it like for you?
Oh, it's fun. It's great. I mean, I love doing that stuff. I've always been that way where, I consider myself, I have no right to say it, but I always consider myself a visual effects artist. I love the craft of the magic trick. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's incredible to work with. I mean, literally, they're the best in the world at what they do. Period. And my job is only to keep them inspired and keep them kind of excited by the project, so that they invest everything they got into making these things look absolutely incredible. You know what I mean? It's pretty amazing. It was a huge learning experience for me. The Maze Runner movies have a certain amount of VFX with them, of course, but nothing like this. You know what I mean? This is
Yeah.
something else entirely. But the really stuff that I'm really proud of is a lot of the stuff that is full CG. You know what I mean? A lot of the sequences that hopefully most people would have never guessed that's a full CG shot. Because those are hard to do and not feel like it pulls you out. You know what I mean? It still marries in with all the stuff that we did shoot for real. You know what I mean? And so there's 35 minutes or so of stuff in the movie that is 100% CG. There's a nighttime scene, for instance, where just because of the nature of things, how it worked out with scheduling and kind of reshoots and the strike that was happening, we were kind of forced to make one of these sequences full CG. And it was nighttime when we meet the Marauders for the first time after Oda gets basically killed.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. And the fact that all that was full CG, with all that night lighting and all the foliage and the world around them and apes on horses. And I mean, it's an incredibly complicated, sequence that we had to do in the span of like 9 weeks. It was so incredibly quick. But by that point, we had learned so much, in making the movie. We were like a year in, to the post process of this thing, that I was happy with how smooth that process went. And there's a great shot in there that I just love of, it's funny. I have the movie right here, sitting here. We could actually pull it up, but um, uh, of Silva, who turns, and he's got this awesome mask on, and this, the lighting, and all these choices, that artists make at Weta, the lighters, the camera guys, the animators, the rendering, the shaders, it's just an incredible amount of collaboration, on all fronts, all the way down to the actors and and the G&E team that lays all the cables to put the cameras up. It's really fun to be a part of a process that is so technical. It's so much crafts, kind of working together. It's fun, man. It's really, really fun to be a part of that stuff, and hopefully all that stuff kind of melts away, and no one really sits there and is distracted by it. But yeah, I feel like I have a superpower now, though, because you have so much power, to change things or to evolve things with the nature of the thing. Man, the next movie that's live action is, I'm not gonna have that power again. So it's gonna be a little bit like, someone took my toys away.
When we were going, as the last few months of production were coming up, were you going back in and changing anything, or were you
How so? What do you
content just
mean?
letting, like, going in, like, anything visual that you were able to,
Oh
or
yeah, dude. I
were
would I
you
would change stuff all over the place in post.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because you had a year, and most movies get done in probably 6 months in post, maybe a little bit longer. I think my major movies are about that. This is a year plus. It was like a year and 2 months or 3 months or something, and that was actually shortened because we were actually supposed to have another month to work on it. The release date got pushed, so we had to squeeze everything. So it was the shortest post period that I think the Apes movies have had. We had to do this movie in with new characters that had to be redesigned with way more ape shots. It was all this stuff. So it was just on the scheduling aspect alone. This movie was an achievement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, there was stuff all over the place. I would invent whole shots because the nature of things, I would shoot a lot of clean plates. Obviously for all the scenes with no actors in it. So that gave me shots that had nothing in it. So I could put whatever I wanted into it. So we could create whole new shots that I can't think of any off the top of my mind. I have to scrub through the movie and we could talk about it. But there's plenty of that stuff where we would invent, whole moments that didn't exist. And sometimes that required us, having to go off and go back to New Zealand and just recapture, some scenes to kind of, oh, we can make this better by doing this. For instance, there's a good example. There was a chat with Proximus at the dinner table scene where he takes him over to the window, right? And he has this conversation about how humans had their chance. You know what I mean? How humans are basically nothing without their tools. That what we didn't shoot that when we were in production. That was an after the fact thing. That was done probably weeks before we turned over the movie, before the movie to be released in theaters. We had a very short little scene where he pulls me to the window and then he just says, "You can't trust humans," and then the scene was over. And it's like, oh, this is an opportunity here to really lay out, what Proximus is saying, what he thinks about humans, and that simple line, which is a key idea for moving forward, even that humans are nothing without their tools. That's what kind of defines us as a race, as
Yeah.
our species, is that our ability to make tools out of our surroundings and all these things and kind of advance ourselves. But we're weaker than apes, and in some of these cases we're not as smart as apes. It's like it's a fascinating idea that we obviously the movie's kind of hanging on this idea of tools, being the kind of thing that's going to kind of sway the balance between who has power and who doesn't. You know what I mean? That's obviously going to be explored in future movies. It was a cool idea, and so we had. I mean, this was like, weeks away from turning the movie over to like we can't work on it anymore. Pencils down, and like we got to do this. We got to do this. And so we had to kind of talk to Weta and like kind of, I'm sorry, this is gonna suck. Blah blah blah. We want to do this. I'm gonna help you though. And so we literally got Kevin and Owen, on a plane. We flew down to New Zealand because basically, if you do it somewhere else, you don't have you have Weta right there and their whole system and their whole team, and there's no delay versus like having to kind of transport, a dozen or 2 dozen, technicians to wherever else we're going to do this thing. So it just made more sense to just fly all the way to New Zealand for a day, shoot this shot, this performance, and then go back home, and make our choices, and then give it to Weta, and they just delivered it over, and it felt easy. I'm sure it wasn't. They were stressing, and they were worked really hard and made it come through for us. But it was a great scene, a great addition that kind of like really, made an extra kind of like point, you know what I mean, to Proximus's character, you know. So there's stuff like that all over the movie, you know.
Yeah, that's what I think always blows my mind hearing stories about, especially big CGI heavy movies like this. It's like, oh, we didn't come up with this idea until a month before the movie comes out, or we didn't have
Mm-hmm.
this shot idea until a couple weeks, you know. And especially with something like this, where you have to, on top of having to go to a whole other location and then get it shot and then have to hand it over to Weta, like that's just always insane to me. And I think it just makes it all the more impressive what you were able to
Yeah.
pull off in that amount of time.
But the reason is because you have the opportunity to do it. Live action movies would do it too if they spent a year editing a movie. You know, you spend that much time on stuff, you know, that you find these little spots. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? You have time to think about it. You know, I just, you know, movies used to be made that way where you would take forever to edit stuff, you know, and it's one thing I kind of miss in this kind of era where like we just go, 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 you know, it's like, get it out. You know what I mean? It's like I've now made, I don't know what it is, 3 movies, you know, in a row where you have a release date kind of almost before you have a script. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And it's just that's a hard thing to kind of wrestle with, you know. And so, you know, I really would look forward to the movies where like let's put it out when it's time. You know, let's take our time to get it right, you know, and have that chance to kind of like live with something. Oh man, for instance, you know, this happens with every movie, by the way, you know, but if you go back and look at a first cut of a movie, it's like, oh my God, it's like
Yeah.
everything is like it's oh, you know, and like when you first cut it, you're like, oh, this scene is so great, you know, and then you look back on it later on when you have some perspective, it's like, oh, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? It's like it just happens, you know. So having some time with stuff, it only helps a movie, you know, and that's I think as you get more and more experience making movies, you tend to like now I just, you know, I was talking to a friend not too long ago about their script and stuff, and like I was looking at cuts. I was like, "Oh, you got to cut this. You don't need this. You know, I'm in this mode now, right now, of like, you know, efficiency. You know what I mean? And so it just changes your perspective as you kind of do more and more of these movies. You know?
Another thing I loved about this movie, and another one of my favorite things, and something that I honestly I think this is everyone's favorite character in the movie, at least that I've talked to, Raka.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, he meets his end halfway through the movie, um, going over the waterfall. But I was curious, and it's very similar. I mean, he follows that same hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, you know, mentor that
Yeah.
you lose in Act One, but was there ever a point where that didn't happen? Did he ever at any point make it through the entire movie, or was his death always going to happen?
Yeah, it was first draft was that he met his end, you know.
Um,
Not that we didn't talk about
uh,
it, you know, that, you know,
yeah,
we could carry it on, but if you
yeah,
want an extra, you know, another character to track into another world and have to deal with his storyline and wrap up his storyline, it's like, yeah, it gets complicated. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, he definitely serves an important function of introducing him to the ideas of Caesar, you know, and you know, it's the idea that in the movie Noah has, you know, essentially all his father figures die, right? His true father, you know, from Eagle Clan dies, you know, and then he meets, you know, Proximus, you know, or sorry, Raka, and then Proximus, and it's like Proximus and Raka are like these dueling father figures in his life, you know, that are kind of, you know, connected by this idea of who Caesar was, but with very different ideas of who he was, and it was just a kind of a fascinating idea to see this character. And that's why I think you see at the Noah at the very end, you know, taking, you know, it's that coming of age thing. He's grown up. He has changed as a person because of these figures that have come into his life and changed him and planted seeds. Both of them, you know, as Proximus and Raka have planted seeds in his mind that might not sprout for, you know, years. You know what I mean?
Obviously, you can't say anything right now, but could you see a world where Rocket comes back in some way, or at least is acknowledged in some way in future movies?
Sure. But I mean, the truth is, like, you don't want to cheapen things either. You know, and funny, I
Yeah,
talked about this with Matt when we were working on Mouse Guard together. You know, and I was asking him about, you know, Koba is like one of the great villains. You know what I mean? Just a great, great character, this tragic kind of Shakespearean kind of, you know, character. And you know, I asked him about like, you know, did you ever wish that you didn't kill him so you had him in the third movie? And he's like, yeah, of course, you know. And but the truth is, like, that's what the story needed. You know, it wanted that. You know, it wanted him to be gone. And so he's like, I sure we wanted the ape to come back and stuff, but it would feel cheap somehow if like he survived the fall. And if there's ever a version where he does, come back, it'll be a way where it feels appropriate, or either of, you know what I mean? That it doesn't feel like a cheap cop out, because the truth is there are so many characters that we create that we have sort of in mind that that you're also going to fall in love. For like the haters, for instance, on this movie, they got rid of my boy Caesar, and there's no Maurice and whatever, and here they are. They like
See a
Raka,
lot of those, yeah.
So it's like it's all about how we kind of characterize these guys and give them something interesting. And I find myself at least leave them wanting more. You know what I mean? That versus like overstaying your welcome, and I don't need any more of that guy anymore. We all know those kind of characters. So hey, at least we hit that, and then we'll see what the future holds. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. So so the raw cut, as I mentioned earlier, and for those who don't know, it's a version of the movie there where you get to watch the movie as it is, final cut, CGI, everything, side by side with all the raw dailies, all the motion capture suits, no CGI, just pure raw version of the movie. And I was blown away by it. It was something. It's something that, like I told you last time, it's something that I've wanted for all three of the other movies.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting
Yeah,
something like
everyone
this.
has.
And
Even
so,
Matt, he always wanted to talk about doing this too.
can you get him to release one
Yeah, who
for even
knows?
just one of them?
Yeah, yeah, who
Um,
knows?
but it was, I think, especially watching it with you guys' commentary, it felt like watching this feature-length documentary of the movie,
Yeah, that's the way
and
I kind
it
of
was
saw
so
it
cool.
too. Yeah, yeah, it's
Um,
fascinating, and like I said, here, can I share my screen? Yeah, yeah. So like this is that feature you're talking about. It's on the Blu-ray, or not the Blu-ray, but the HD DVD. And you can see, what we captured, what we shot, versus all this is CG, for instance, and this sequence, or for Raka, we were just talking about Raka, you can really watch the scene. I'm gonna turn down the audio here. How we shoot it and what it becomes, right? Which is kind of fascinating to some people who care about the technical sides of these things. I mean, this thing will wear out its welcome for, I think, a majority of folks who who don't care about this kind of stuff. But for the geeks that like to understand these things, it's a fascinating experience, and that we found ourselves watching it, you know, you're getting all the facial performances and all the details, and just the effort, the sheer effort that goes into like making these things a reality is on full display with this thing. And how we change takes, and what we shoot and what we don't shoot. That scene I was talking about here, where I'm on just a stage somewhere shooting this stuff, and everything else behind him is full CG because it was anyway. So it's a fascinating way to kind of watch the movie, and just kind of understand sort of what goes into these kinds of things. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's
I encourage anyone who cares about that sort of stuff, or interested in it. They might love it.
if you haven't checked it out already, I definitely recommend doing so. It is one of the coolest bonus features. I mean, especially in an era where bonus features on physical media just isn't really much of a thing
Yeah,
nowadays. It's one of the coolest
exactly.
I've seen in years.
Yeah, so that was my thing. Like I grew up on that era, right? Where like,
Yeah,
I have a pile of DVDs before Blu-ray that I only bought for the special
yeah,
features. You know what I
I did
mean?
too. Yeah,
So like I have a ton of that stuff. And like I was out of film school. I mean, I was out of in film school, I guess, but even after film school, that was my film school. I would learn so much about movie making with that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's a shame that the sort of the streaming era has kind of lost that. And that was one of my things I was arguing about. I really wanted this feature to be on the streaming version, and maybe there's still a chance for that to happen. We'll see. I'm assuming it's just a button push that they can just kind of put it on there. But I really wish more people would be able to watch this thing, because it's a fascinating look into the process, and it's not like kind of what we typically get today, where it's these puff pieces, where it's just it's like a marketing piece more than it is like a real look into the art and craft of making movies. You know what I mean? Like some of the best, obviously, is still the Lord of the Rings stuff. Those making ofs are like, it's hours and hours, like 8 hours worth of stuff, of documentary, basically, where they show
yeah,
warts and all, like people having arguments, which we all have on set, and that kind of stuff. Like it's fascinating to me. Um, The only little trip up on that version that we had, because we had been making the movie basically in that way for so long that we had the pieces to be able to really quickly just turn that switch and make it happen, um, and so uh, the trickiest thing was there were some crew members that didn't sign up for having their faces. So actually, if you watch it, I had to blur all their faces.
Yeah, I saw all those. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple times that where, and that's just a weird kind of contractual thing where they're allowed to be in making ofs that are like 40 minutes long. They're not allowed to be making ofs that are 2 hours long. And of course, our
Yeah.
movie is 2 hours long, and so it became this legal thing that we had to kind of overcome. But I'm so glad the studio kind of supported this idea, and Steve Asbell in particular, at my boss at Fox, or was Fox, now 20th, an old friend of mine. He really pushed hard to make this happen too, and Disney was working hard to try to make sure that it made its way on. And I think it's a cool thing that people take for granted, these images that you see. You just think, oh,
Yeah.
it's a button and you push, and we don't really get to show the details behind that stuff. But like, man, when you see just the level of, oh, the lighting has to, here's an example on that fire scene with the two of them. Um, they have to almost manually match the flickering fire of the real onset fire, because if the fire is out of sync, it feels weird. It doesn't fit. So it's like these little details and the,
Yeah.
the craft and like the subtlety that artists have to kind of go into to make this stuff just hopefully disappear in front of your eyes. It's like amazing. I can't speak more highly of just the work that not just the visual effects crew, but the special effects crew, and our editors and our support staff on the editing side of things. It's an incredible experience to work on something that required so many hardworking kind of craftspeople.
Yeah, that was something that I took away from it specifically. It's just the amount of detail that
Yeah,
goes into creating every shot, and whether it's on camera or in the computer, it's just insane. And so I just
yeah,
it's one of the coolest features I've ever seen. I hope that the next, whether it's next James Cameron's next Avatar movie or the next
yeah,
Apes movie, I want
yeah,
to see
right,
this happen more. I think it's
yeah,
just incredibly cool.
yeah. It's pretty wild.
So something you told me last time before I'd seen the movie is that there was a certain actor that you really wanted to get for a role because of where that character might go in the next movie. Was that actor Deacon Lockman?
Deachin. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess so. Yeah, I don't remember our conversation before, but like,
Okay.
yeah, Deachin was important to me because um, when you got to that ending there, especially that little epilogue at the end, we
Yeah.
always treated it as, oh, this is the beginning of what's next. This isn't actually the ending of our movie. This is the beginning of whatever comes next. And so I thought it was really important that you know we introduce someone there that I know her.
Okay.
Maybe if you don't even know who her name is, like there's something important going on there. You know what I mean? And so it gives that all kind of some weight that this is just the beginning. You know what I mean? Literally, a new door has opened up. And the paths in front of us are exciting and interesting and dramatic, and we get to go places now that the table has been set. We get to go places now that are going to be really you know different, and I think fun to explore. And so Deechin, yeah, it was I asked her, it's like, oh, it'd be awesome to get her to do this thing. And I love Severance and other things she's done, and she's a fantastic actress. And like I said, look, the truth is, you basically have one line, it's like two shots or something, but I think it's important that that you it doesn't just feel like an extra we cast, that we're saying something here by putting you in this. And so yeah, that was one of them for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you honestly, that's exactly the feeling I had when I was watching that scene when she showed up. I'm like, oh, I recognize her. I've seen Severance.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah, I think
as
we're
that whole
saying
scene
something
was,
there.
yeah, as the whole scene was playing out, I was like, oh, something bigger is going on here. What's this? And then it ends, and
Yeah.
we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I think you pulled it off perfectly with her. And speaking of that ending, it got a lot of people talking and speculating about where things are going to go and how intelligent humans are still around and what are they doing. Was it always the plan to have more intelligent humans besides May in this
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, it
was
just
like,
naturally should be. You know what I mean?
yeah,
There's so much. There's so much that we could be doing. That doesn't even lead up to yet the Charlton Heston '68 version. You know what I mean? We
okay,
always find ourselves somewhere on that step. You know, um, it's there's it's funny that this franchise has always had it's a little looser connections to itself.
yeah,
You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
not like a crazy strict,
It's not a hard set
canon.
canon of anything. Yeah,
Exactly. But and in a weird way, it kind of connects, and there can be connections and stuff. But it almost feels like the real diehard fans they're open to, let's just kind of forget that, or let's embrace
yeah,
that, whatever it is. We're all fans of all the movies, so yeah, yeah, it's important. It's important. I think um, that we have a new page to turn there that we get to explore in the future, because it'll be important. It'll be
yeah.
interesting. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting. And wouldn't it be nice to actually see apes and humans working together for a bit, and not just turning against each other? That
Okay.
there's hope that that's possible. You know, there's just yeah, there's a lot of good dramatic stuff that we can do now with what we set up here.
I know you probably can't say much, if anything at all, but speaking of where things are going to go, is there anything specific that you either want to see happen, or you've talked to, Rick and Amanda and Josh, and, you know, gotten anything figured out as far as where the next story is going to be? Do you know anything about what you think it's going to look like yet? And if
I
so,
can't
what
I
might that
can't
be?
say about any of this stuff. Of course
Uh,
not. I can't
okay.
say it. But I will say that it's not worth doing unless we take a big swing.
Okay.
Take some big swings,
I like that
and
answer.
that's what's important. And I think that's what always these movies are. We want we were really even when I took on this movie in the very beginning, I was not interested in just a kind of shameless cash grab. Doing another one, I feel like we had a story to tell here. I feel like we had a swing to make, that felt like this could stand on its own to some degree. It is certainly supported by what came before us, but it was not just a kind of shameless cash grab. Whether people like the movie or not, you know what I mean? I think they can at least appreciate that we weren't just kind of like phoning it in here to have another one. And it'll be the same way with the next one. We will want to surprise people. We'll want to go to places that are interesting and thought provoking. That's the kind of the secret sauce of these movies. They are thinking person's movies wrapped in big, Hollywood blockbuster, stuff. You know what I mean? And so we'll continue with that, and making like challenging choices and making sure that the characters themselves are interesting and deep and profound and and challenged. You know what I mean? And go places maybe that are unexpected. You know what I mean? I think that's
Yeah.
just really fun. It's going to be really fun, I think, to kind of chart kind of Noah's. I'm really glad people have like they've fallen in love with Noah, or if not, even the least kind of receptive people were at least intrigued by his character. You know what I mean? And I think you're seeing just the beginning of this guy and where he might go. And again, you know, we very intentionally kind of planted these seeds in his mind that will be important, both from Proximus and Raka and his friends and May and all these things. He was an innocent, like naive character in the beginning, and he's forever changed by the end of this movie, and will go in places that hopefully will, surprise everyone.
Okay.
So it's that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
I loved what you did with Noah just as a character in general, and I've had some theories about where he might go, because there's definitely differing possibilities about where his character could
Yeah,
go based
that's
on
right.
all those seeds that were planted. So I'm
That's right.
fascinated
I
by
mean, you look at
where things are
Everett.
going to go.
Look at his last shot in the movie. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? There's a lot going on, and we spent a lot of time talking about that last shot and the expressions on his face and what's happening there. And you know, yeah, it's important. He is changed. He is thrust into a new chapter in his life by the end of that movie. And yeah, it'll be super fun to explore what happens next.
Yeah. So I got one other thing. I'll just ask because I have to. I know you probably won't be able to say anything else. But have you heard anything official regarding, when a sequel might happen? And do you know, or at least have you decided if you're going to direct or how involved you're going to be with it?
Yeah, these decisions don't come until we fully are done with the story. I mean, that's the great thing about these things is like you don't need to rush these things. This
I'd rather
franchise has
you don't.
lasted
So
for
yeah,
50 plus years. They'll
yeah,
they'll still be around. So we get to kind of take our time and focus on. The truth is like if you're gonna do another one, you got to do the third one too because you're talking trilogy. So the truth is we really kind of need to figure out the beginning, the middle, and the end here coming up in this trilogy. And I think once we all feel comfortable with that, then we'll start that process of okay, when do we shoot it? How do we shoot it? Where do we shoot it? All that kind of stuff. So
gotcha.
yeah, right now it's purely that was a fun ride. Now let's kind of think about really we had ideas on where we wanted to go. Let's really kind of dig in and give ourselves, something really sturdy to stand on, moving forward.
I got you. So that kind of wraps up most of my questions here. But in the meantime, until we get any official word on when the next movie's coming and all that, what are you doing now? Obviously we know Legend of Zelda is on the horizon. I think that's official
Yeah.
now. Um, do you have immediate plans to be jumping into that, or are you just, enjoying this downtime right now?
Yeah, honestly, I am kind of enjoying the downtime. Like I said, the Apes movie was 5 years, from start to finish. Granted, with some gaps and regime changes at the studio and pandemics, sprinkled in there. But that last 2.5 years of production all the way to releasing the movie, was pretty incredibly fun, but also kind of exhausting. And so I needed to kind of just, everyone kind of wants to work on the next thing, of course, but like I need to just kind of like go spend some time with my kids. They're like very young girls. They're 9 and 6. So they're like the sweethearts right now. So I want to spend time with them and also you got to recharge. You got to kind of daydream. Like that's a big part of my process right now is daydreaming a little bit of like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to see that? Or, that would be awesome. So a lot of times a lot of my daydreaming is on the visual side of things, like, I don't write a script, but I do write a script visually. I have tons of artwork, that, oh, this is the vibe of the movie right here. Same thing with the beginning of this movie. Some of those first images popped up. They became like these kind of touchstones for, oh, there's the movie. That one image, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, we'll keep moving forward. We've got a good it's first world problems. We've got some really exciting stuff to be working on, and we're happy to kind of be doing that. You know what I mean?
Well, Wes, thank you so much again for taking time to talk to me about this movie. And thank you for making the movie because I love it. I've seen it multiple times at this point. I'm going to continue rewatching it as the years go
Sweet.
on until the next one comes.
See, what we
And
should do next time, what we should do next
yep,
time is like you actually watch the movie in real time together, and we just have a conversation
I would
about
love
it
to do that.
as it's playing. It's almost like it's like commentary live. And you need like some chat too, so they can asking questions and we can
Yeah, have
talk
live
about these
chat
things.
going. Yeah,
You know what I mean? You probably can't show the movie, of course, but you can kind of do some kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
sync up thing or something. Okay, we're
yeah.
starting the movie now, and
I
then you
would
just kind
love
of
to do
talk
that.
about it. This was kind of fun because it's hard for me to remember. These movies have gone on for so long, and there's so many choices made for every shot. Whether that leaf in the background that was too shiny that was kept distracting us, or all the way down to his face take. We need to change his take of his face because it's telling us the wrong thing. It's like there's so many choices through every frame of this movie that I've forgotten. I need some way to jog my memories because there's so many great kind of stuff to talk about just in the art of kind of of filmmaking, which is really kind of what I like talking about anyway. I don't
Yeah.
like going too much in detail of like the undercarriage of narrative stuff, which we were trying to protect a little bit. You know what I mean?
Have you gone back to rewatch it since it came out at all?
No, I kind of don't do that. Typically I
No.
don't really watch the movies after I know it so well.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally know it to the frame. You know what I mean? So I need some distance from it, and then I go back and look at it probably in a year from now, and I'll say, oh, that was good. Oh, I could have done that. Whatever. I do the same thing with the other movies too. But it's just kind of the way I am. I kind of give it to the world, let them do whatever they're going to do with it. And I turn, go on to the next thing. You know what I mean? It's just kind of
I got you.
healthy.
Well, again, thank you so much, Wes. This was
Yeah,
awesome. I loved talking about the movie with you. You did a great job, and hopefully, I'll be able to talk to you again for the next one in the potential near future. So,
cool. Sounds good,
and
man.
good luck with everything you got going on in the future. Good luck with Zelda. I hope nothing but success comes your way.
Yeah, thanks, dude, and good job on creating an awesome community. And hats off to you for fighting the good fight.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, cheers, dude.